I write this to you from an internet cafe. It's certainly been a while since I've even been near a computer. The air is also much more unclean, polluted. I would guess so. Anyways, I would rather not disclose who I am. I changed my name and identity because I was absent for too long. Well, not exactly. I have aged, but almost no time has passed since I left. I feel like I should tell my story, even though it is completely unbelievable. I don't think that you even understand what I just said pertaining to the time dilation. I don't either, to be honest. Now, where do I begin? I am, rather was, a simple guy. I had a mundane life, was a little introverted, and studied engineering. I had a knack for putting things together, loved to pull things apart to see how they work ever since I was young. But I also loved nature, and I still do. Where I lived, there was a forest nearby, as well as a small mountain. I used to take hikes and wander around for hours at a time. It was like a catharsis after a long day of work. I was still attending college. I remember it was a sunny day. I decided to go on a hiking trip toward the mountain. The summer heat didn't stop me from walking up those paths. The trees gave me shade, though. The sunstroke was not an immediate issue at the time. I brought a few bottles of water and a few snacks so that I could eat and, take a break. I also knew the paths well, so it was impossible for me to get lost. Yet, in spite of the fact I managed to get lost, I was daydreaming when I managed to get off the trail and I hiked into the woods. It was getting late, so I tried to get out of the woods or orient myself to get back to the path, but to no avail. I was desperately trying to get out, trying to call someone on my phone even. There was no reception at all. I knew there were no cave systems in the area, nor any real caves to be honest, but I managed to find one. It started raining, so I took shelter inside of the small opening. The cave only went on for about 10 meters long, if even that. I managed to get inside, and it wasn't dark. I actually could see really well in there. But I didn't see the ledge behind the spot that I sat down in. As I leaned back trying to relax while I waited for the rain to stop, I fell. And that wasn't a small drop. I fell for what felt like a dozen meters, only to hit a soft surface. As I regained my composure, I opened my eyes only to see that I landed on a thick moss. It didn't look like anything I had ever seen before. It was thick and soft, enough to soften my fall so that I didn't get hurt too much. I did feel sore and I had a few cuts from the rocks scraping during my not so graceful fall, and I looked up to see the opening from which I emerged, only to see a pitch black hole above me. I got up from the soft moss and I looked forward. Another opening. Another opening. No, that's not possible, I muttered to myself as I saw light from what appeared to be an entrance to the cave where I now lay. I should be underground, I told myself as I got up. I could smell ozone as if there were no rain. Well, I shouldn't because I was underground, but I wasn't? It is really confusing. I trotted toward the opening, and I was blinded by the sun for a few moments. A clear sky. A clear, purple sky. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I looked toward the forest in front of me. The grass had a reddish hue alongside the leaves on the trees. These trees were completely alien to me. They were tall and looked more like mushrooms, but there was no mistaking it. They were trees. They had branches and leaves on them. I started walking forward, unable to comprehend what the hell I was looking at. Was I in a coma? I thought to myself. No, this must not be real. I'm dreaming. I pinched myself as sure as hell I felt the pain. I slapped myself for a few times for good measure, and I wasn't waking up. How hard did I hit my head? And I even thought that I could have died. But it all felt real. The sights and even the sounds were just all foreign to me. I heard some kind of chirping, but it sounded more like high-pitched wailing. I walked in a daze for God knows how long. It soon started to become dark, and I decided to pick up some sticks and try to light a fire. I had a lighter with me, so it shouldn't be that difficult. I went around searching for some dry sticks when I heard some kind of noise just above the trees, shuffling in the leaves. I thought at first it must be the wind, but then a creature that resembled a monkey emerged, dangling from a thick branch on a tree that was quite distant from me. It was near enough I could discern its features though. It was hairless with skin as white as snow. It had 4 black eyes and 4 arms with 2 legs. On each arm and on both of its legs, it had 5 fingers. We were both motionless. We were in some sort of staring contest. The creature blinked with 2 eyes on the top, and then the bottom 2 started blinking as well, making some sort of shrieking noise, and then it disappeared into the tree above. I was completely shocked. I thought it ran away from me. I thought it saw me as some threat. But it wasn't me that it was scared of. It was something much, much worse. I could hear growling from behind me. I slowly turned around to see a massive beast of a creature. It also had 4 eyes, but this one had black fur. Its teeth had 2 rows and its saliva dripped onto the red grass below. It looked like an oversized alien bear, and it looked hungry. I backed away slowly, making careful steps as to not trip. Then the beast started running towards me, roaring just like a bear, but if that bear had smoked every day for most of its life. A deep guttural sound that was, it's still ingrained to my memory to this day. I turned and ran, not looking back. I went in a zigzag pattern between the trees in order to lose the monstrosity, but it kept up with me. As I ran, I felt like I was making more distance between the creature and myself. As I thought I was escaping, I tripped on a large rock and fell face first into the grass like a horror movie cliche. I turned around to see where the bear thing was. It was still barreling towards me. I picked up the rock I tripped on so I could throw it into the oncoming monster. To the horror, an eye opened up on the rock and it looked straight at me. An eye on the rock. I screamed and I threw the rock towards the 4-eyed bear. To my surprise, the rock excreted some kind of liquid that quickly turned into some gas substance. It distracted the bear, and from the looks of it, the gas irritated its eyes. I looked around quickly. I didn't know where to go. I remember I had a small pocket knife in my backpack. I quickly managed to get it out and open it, and I hid behind it. I kept silent. The bear thing recovered, but it didn't seem to have the will to find me. I heard its heavy footsteps fade into the distance. Once I couldn't hear them, I looked at where the bear was. I saw the rock, its eye opening once again. I looked around, and after a few moments, its locked eye locked on me. Then suddenly, at least a dozen insect-like legs grew from its body and it scurried off into the forest, not breaking eye contact with me. I shuddered at the fact that I actually held that thing in my hands. After that friendly encounter with the local wildlife, I decided to be more careful from there on. I managed to collect a few sticks and a few rocks as to not start a forest fire. And of course poking them with my knife or a long stick to see if they were alive. I don't want any more of that happening. A few of them were. Like before, they scurried off like cockroaches as the first one I encountered. But most, thankfully, were not little creatures. I managed to get a fire going. As the night crept in, it became a lot colder. During the day it was a bit fresh, but not chilly or cold. I definitely wasn't dressed for the occasion. I had shorts and a thin short-sleeved shirt on. Back home it was scorching hot, as I said. During the night, I could barely sleep. I slept 2 hours tops. The sound in the forest were surreal, terrifying. I still had to come to grips that I was not home. I was literally thrown into the unknown. You can probably say that I accidentally threw myself into the unknown, but that's besides the point. I managed to survive a few days until I ran out of snacks. I rationed them. I managed to find a stream of drinkable water so I could refill my bottles. But food was the main problem. I did find some berries, but I didn't want to risk it just yet. Other than the weird berries, I found other strange plant life, as well as wild animals. I found some sort of flower that emitted a toxin, which attracted the rock things. I couldn't tell you the purpose of it. It was there. Then there were spiky plants. I know we have those back at home, but these had spikes which thrusted themselves into an unlucky animal that happened to come close enough. It would thrust its spikes into the animal and it would inject some kind of venom which would paralyze the animal. Then roots would grow towards the animal at great speed and then it would just drag it underground. That's a horrifying death. The first time I saw it in action, the unlucky animal was some sort of rabbit or jackalope, something. Slightly larger and with 4 eyes and long ears, but it looked harmless. I thought of hunting one of those jackalope things since they were quite common. I tried and I failed. I had no ranged weapons and those guys had a 6th sense, it seems. As soon as I even thought of an aggressive move toward the thing, it would just go away fast. So there was no hope of trying to catch the thing. Soon enough, I became very hungry. I was starving, actually. At some points, I remember running away from some sort of predator. Barely. The thing was on 2 legs with a snout and 2 pure black eyes. It was slower than me, thankfully, so I managed to outrun and hide. And I can't tell you the details of how it looked other than the general description I just kind of gave you. Exhausted and hungry, I decided to test my luck on those berries. I picked the orange ones. They were slightly larger than the others, and I ate one, waited for a bit. Thankfully, nothing happened. Then I ate almost the entire bush that they grew on. They were kind of like plums and had a sweet taste, and I felt full for once. Then, after about an hour, I felt dizzy. Then I felt sick, and my head was spinning. I could barely walk. I would remember walking, then seemingly going unconscious just to wake up in the middle of doing something. Like that entire time in between, I don't remember. Once I was just punching a tree. Other times I would just be laying on the floor, having a staring contest with one of those rock things. The rest I don't remember. It is just lost. I woke up with a fever after God knows how long. But I wasn't on the forest floor, I was indoors. It was a house. Well, more of like a hut. I was on a bed of furs with a towel on my forehead. I felt like I was run over by a bus. My head was aching and I felt sick, but I wasn't in a state of delirium. I looked around and I saw there were things in the hut, a bow and quiver with some arrows, small wooden plates of sort, and other things you would find in a primitive hut. There was a sword made of iron or something from what I can recall. After a few moments, what appeared as a woman entered the hut. She was short from what I saw, with the long white hair and red eyes. Looked like an albino woman, but it looked, I don't know, normal? I was probably still out of my mind at the time, so I'm not really surprised. She rushed toward me and knelt down, telling me something in a language I didn't understand. She removed the towel and put her hand on my forehead. I do remember saying something. Of course she didn't understand, but I'm pretty sure if she did, it probably didn't make any sense. I passed out again there shortly after. After some time I woke up again. This time I felt better. A bit sore, but I was back to my normal self. Beside me was a small plate with food and some wooden utensils. The meal was a combination of fruits and meat. The combination wasn't the best, but, it satisfied my hunger. After eating the meal, I laid down again thinking about what happened. First thing, the orange ones I had are like a drug, at least when consumed in large quantities. Second, there are actually people here. I was still confused as to how I found myself here, but I first have to find a way to survive here in order to figure out where I am. After some time passed, a person entered the hut. This time it was a man. He had white hair that stretched halfway down to his shoulders, red eyes, and a thick white beard. He was about my height. He came to the side and sat on the floor. He pointed at the plate and said something along the lines of,
Good elo est.
I couldn't understand him, but I presumed he told me that if the meal was good. I assumed, so I just simply nodded. Do you understand me? Do you speak English? I said to him.
Ik nai remem ki tik zak.
He said with a confused expression on his face. I tried communicating with him, but to no avail. Others joined him to try to talk to me, including the young woman who I first saw when I was high off those berries. About 4 people were asking me these questions. They started pointing to things. The young woman started by picking up a spoon and saying,
Spanutella.
I repeated what it was called in English. After a while, I just pointed at myself and said my name. Ray. Ray. The people around me started introducing themselves. The young woman's name was Tanya. The bearded man's name was Michael. From what I gathered, the Michael is a close relative of Tanya. Later that day, I went out of the hut. There was an entire village of around 50 people at most. All had white hair and red eyes. It was a peculiar sight. Although, I think I was an even weirder sight since I had brown eyes and dark brown hair. After a while of going around the village alongside Michael and Tanya, both of them pointed at things after telling me how they are called in their language and me repeating in English. I had a basic vocabulary of their language, though of course I couldn't communicate with them still. It helped a lot. And a lot of the words are surprisingly quite similar or identical to those in English. I was surprised and thankful that the locals seemed to take great care of me, showing me around the village and teaching me their language. They probably weren't cannibals, hopefully. As it became dark, I was introduced to what I assumed was the village elder. He was an old man in the biggest hut in the village. He was bald with only a few strands of white hair and he had the same red eyes. I was told to take a seat opposite him. Then I was left alone with the old man. He looked me over, then got up with the help of his cane. He motioned to me that I remain seated on the floor. He grabbed a small jar containing some grayish powder, and he carefully made a circle around me with the powder. He sat down opposite me and had a short chant. The powder around me lit up, and the color started turning into a snow white. I apologize. I am impatient and can't really wait for you to learn our tongue, the old man said in perfect English. What? You speak English? I said, quite surprised. No, the man shook his head. I had heard of it, but I had never learned it. This spell will only last so long. I will ask you some questions, then you can ask me your questions. All right, go on. Where are you from? The old man leaned in and squinted his eyes, awaiting my answer. I answered to the best of my ability, where I am from and how I got here. I see your name is Ray, yes? I nodded. All right. I have met one of your kind before, a long time ago. It was a rare event, a thing of legends. Look, I don't know how I got myself into this, but can you explain to me exactly where I am? The old man considered my question for a moment, then answered. Ray, there are many names for this place. but to my village it is known as New Home. And your world is called Old Home. I took a minute to think about what he said. You mean you come from where I come from? A very long time ago, yes. And there are others like you? Yes and no. There are other villages, but farther out, I've seen people that look similar to you. They are newcomers. Okay. I was a bit overwhelmed, but I had one more pressing question on my mind. What is the name of that? What is the name of all that is holy? Are those rock insects? The old man chuckled a bit before answering. Oh, they are the eyes of the forest. Don't be bothered by them. They are harmless unless you harm them. Even if you do, you would have to be worried about the goddess's wrath. Instead, more of them harming you. Goddess? I asked. Platia is the goddess of the forest. She is our protector. As long as you don't harm the forest, she will not harm you. So I just simply nodded. The spell is going to be done soon. Any other questions? Yes, what is the name of this village? And your name as well, so I know. I am the Elder Ashtar of the Zion village. After that, the powder around me turned black. The old man Ashtar motioned for me to stand up and exit, and I did. Outside, Michael was waiting for me, and he showed me to the hut where I was originally placed. This will be my home for the time being as it stands. Days went by, and those days turned into months. I slowly learned more and more of their language, and I also started working with the villagers. They taught me how to use the bow and arrow, and I joined them on their hunts, and I made new friends. I also got to that life. I got used to the life amongst these strange people. They worship the forest, and her protector is named Platia. I learned that she could look like a fox with 9 tails, or a fluor-eyed fox. Her human form is that of a short woman with long black hair and, of course, red eyes. Platia blessed us in this hunt, Michael said as he had the rabbit or jackalope animal that I learned they called sets. So that's what they're called over here, sets. And he slung it over his shoulder. It was indeed. Even if you were able to kill something today, Ray, Michael's younger brother Chris said to me as he dragged a deer-like creature called Kalopa with my help. Yeah, it was quite a hunt, I said casually. As our group finally got to the village, with a small crowd awaited us. The last few hunting expeditions were not as successful, but now we were able to bring enough to feed the village for the time being. 5 deer, 20 rabbits, and a few other small critters. You're back, shouted Tanya as she ran toward us. She hugged Michael and Chris, and then finally me. She was slightly younger than me. I was in my mid-20s at the time, and she was in her early 20s, I think. Finally, a proper meal will be had, someone said from the crowd. Was anyone hurt? Did you get attacked by the Kryptos? Tanya said. Kryptos was the bear thing that attacked me on the first day when I came here. No, all was well, I said. We were not harassed, fortunately enough, Michael added. Thanks, Platia. I will go help prepare. You boys deserve a hearty meal, Tanya said, as she went to help the others hang up the animals and skin them. I slowly began to accept this lifestyle. I actually liked it here. Life was simple. Even if it had some layers I didn't yet understand. Then one day, some of my neighbors and a good friend got into a fight with the residents of a nearby village. It was something about them breaching our hunting grounds. The debate got heated and one of them shot an arrow at Michael. I was not present at the time that it happened. I was helping around the village at the time. I worried that this would escalate, but I was told these things sometimes happen and I shouldn't worry about it. Michael was wounded and was still recovering when him and I were woken up in the middle of the night to screams and shouts. Despite still being in pain, he ran out to see what was happening and I was right behind him. We saw two of the huts set ablaze and unknown faces cutting down our friends and family. We fought. I killed one of them. I had no time to process the fact that I took someone's life. It was self-defense after all, and I still had more problems to worry about. We were outnumbered. I saw as Old Man Astor helplessly swatted at the men as they plunged their spears into him. "Ray, get Tanya and go. I'll hold them off," Michael shouted at me. Tanya stood behind us with tears in her eyes. "Michael, you're coming with us. We can't escape." I was cut short as an arrow went through Michael's throat and Tanya screamed. Michael fell to his knees with a panicked look in his eyes, gurgling on his own blood, and he pointed towards the forest. He then fell face first on the floor and remained motionless. I took Tanya by the arm and ran, and we ran and ran and ran. She insisted on going back. I couldn't imagine how she felt. I had tears in my eyes, and I stopped and I looked at her. I grabbed her by the shoulders. "Tanya, we can't go back. No, back. If we will die if we do." I desperately tried to tell her. I then saw torches in the distance. I grabbed her hand and just kept running through the dark forest. Arrows flew around us. I was struck in the shoulder, but I kept running. Then Tanya was struck in the leg. She fell. She took a quick glance at where the arrow struck her. There was no way she could walk, let alone run. I tried to pick her up and carry her. "Ray, leave me. I will slow you down." She was hitting me and pushing herself away from me. "No, I'm not leaving you, damn it," I shouted. "Leave me. Go," she screamed away, pushing herself and nearly toppling me over. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," I repeated to myself as I ran. I ran alone now. I looked back in the distance as the men got to Tanya. She looked at me as they grabbed her by her hair and put a blade to her neck. I saw red, and then I turned and just continued running. After I escaped, I managed to get the arrow out of myself and tend to the wound as best as I could. I learned which herbs were best for preventing illness, and a plant which acted as a disinfectant. I survived, but the guilt I carry is great. I considered ending it, but I knew that her death would then be all in vain. I decided to live and explore this strange new world. Months passed, yet I stumbled upon new villages, new peoples, and faces. I didn't stick around. I would just stay for a few days and trade, then continue. The forest seemed to have no end. For months on end, I traveled through it. Thought I was going in circles. But the new villages and new people I met along the way told me otherwise. Most people of the forest were friendly, if weary of strangers, especially ones like myself who didn't look like them. Some are outright hostile and refuse anyone who approaches their territory. I found new animals and plants, great rivers. I followed that and it brought me to new sights. I saw a waterfall that would probably rival Niagara Falls. I saw strange flying pieces of land that floated just below the clouds. Massive, reptile-like creatures that resembled dinosaurs. Very similar but distinctly different in a special way. And a lot of living rocks. It was strangely beautiful in a way. Nearly a year passed of me wandering the forest, and I came upon the beach, an ocean. I was slightly proud of myself that I managed to get this far. I decided to follow the beach, occasionally going onto the forest in order to gather supplies and food. I went for a better part of 2 months following the beach. I finally stumbled upon a place that I hoped I could call home. The tall walls promised safety. A city. A gleam of hope and civilization. Order order in a chaotic world.